Hey everybody, welcome back to OnReviewCast. I'm your host, Ash, and today we're looking at Interview with a Vampire, episode 2. So, yeah, actually excited for this. This episode, I felt like right off the bat was a little bit weaker than the first one, but let's get into it. We'll give it a chance. We'll give it a chance before. We'll give it a chance. Yeah, we're gonna give it a chance before we bash into it. I'm kidding. Let's just give it a chance. All right. Well, this is Interview with a Vampire, episode 2 on review.
AMC series Interview with a Vampire, season 1, episode 2.
Episode composition courtesy of the website Fandom. This episode is entitled ... After the Phantoms of Your Former Self, written by Jonathan Scorsese and Dave Harris, and directed by Alan Taylor. Air date is October 9th, 2022. Synopsis. Louis recounts his transition to become a vampire, his first kill, his reluctance to break ties with his family, and his ultimate failure to enjoy the art of his new powers, much to the chagrin of Lestat. So the episode starts off, kind of picks off right where, it starts off with, I was going to say it picks off right where we left off with them in the church with episode 1, but it doesn't really start there. It actually starts with the interviewer kind of just taking a look, gander at this picture, and he's admiring the work and the interviewer Daniel, and he's wondering where it's from or whatever, and tells Reid about the constant the constant sound that he's been hearing in the building. And Reid just assures him he's like, oh no, don't worry about it. It's just the swing of the building. And now looking upon this and looking back at this, because I've seen the series, this is on review. I'm wondering is that the swing of the building? Is that what that was? Is that what it is? I mean, he says that, but they're vampires, and I thought so. This whole dynamic is kind of weird, by the way. The whole thought of thinking that this is all, and this is, I guess this is why I didn't. This right off the bat, yeah, okay, guys. This episode didn't have a lot of action in it. It didn't have a lot of action in it. Not really, or not. No. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't dramatic. It's the first episode, but here's the thing. This episode, I think it was kind of more or less from the first episode coming into this is okay, now he's the vampire, now he's transitioned, and we kind of see the I think it focuses on the theme of vampirism, vampire, you're a vampire, but also are they better than us? Are they better than us? When I say us, I mean humans. Are they better than us, being the perspective of humans watching this? Are they better than the humans themselves that are in this world? Are they truly better? Or are they truly worse? Or are they the same? I think that's the question we take ourselves into, or we ponder upon throughout this entire episode. And the episode starts off, and Louis and Daniel are sitting down for a meal, and already, I guess, again, to show this from the cinematography aspects of this, they sit on opposite sides of the table. One shows up later than the other, or earlier than the other, or the human Daniel, and this is the episode of contrast. I feel like Daniel shows up early to the table to basically eat the food, and Reid informs him that he'll be joining you at meal 7, which is and he jokes about saying stuff oh, you're fattening me up to feed on me later, which is kind of true, but also a little odd. If you think about it, for this killing machine to be so refined and so sophisticated, to first of all have have their guests go through 7 meals before joining them, and it was I'm fashionably kind of fancy kind of thing. So again, Daniel, they're at this dinner, and Daniel sits on opposite sides of the Daniel sits on the opposite side of the table, and they're serving him his meal. His meal looks very human, very natural to us. And then they're preparing the Louis meal. And Louis' meal is just consistent to look like a bunch of blood bags or whatever it is. And of course, he shows up fashionably late, creating this character, and I guess this mystique about him, kind of really. But yeah, right off the bat, in this first scene, well, second scene, but still, this first scene, well, second scene, sorry, second scene. In the second scene, the director and the writers and the people creating the show instantly try to get to us to say, get us to view that, like, hey, this is an episode of contrast. This is the show where we've been and where we're coming from. But yeah, so it continues on showing, kind of sort of picking up like where it left off in terms of like, it kind of shows up in terms of like where the priest had been murdered, and now Louis and Lestat are going into the cemetery to basically get rid of the bodies that they've so brutally murdered, and Louis having a hard time. And something that I found that was actually like really interesting is that as he's stumbling about the graveyard, and he's going about and he's having a hard time transitioning, because he's transitioning right now into a vampire. Like I said, it picks up right where it left off. He's transitioning right now into the vampire. Lestat is basically informing him, like, you know, don't freak out, like it'll be okay or whatever it is. But something that was really interesting was that like he tries to drink, and I'm wondering if this is a part of like vampire lore. He tries to take a drink from the corpse that that Lestat had basically made, because like it was essentially like dripping blood. And I was wondering like the dead man's blood thing from like Supernatural, is that like a common thing? And guys, let me know in the comments, comment section down below on YouTube, or comment section. I think Spotify has a comment section. But anyway, let me know what you think on all of our socials. Like, is vampirism? Because I never knew. I'm not too sure. Vampirism, drinking dead man's blood. Like, is that always been a thing? Because like I said before too in an episode previous, watching Angel, Buffy, and all those other shows, like I'm not too sure. I've never been quite sure like that was a part of like their lore. Like they can't drink vampire blood. They can't drink. Oh no, not my blood. They can't drink. We'll get to the vampire rules later, but they can't drink dead man's blood. Because dead man's blood basically does something to him, and he explains to him that basically like, oh, it'll kill you faster than the death that you tried to avoid, or something like that. Lestat says something along those lines. But yeah, I just found that a very interesting little bit of like lore in terms of like vampirism. Yeah. So the scene where like Louis is just like, so they get rid of these bodies, and Louis starts to like, he's starting to experience vampirism, the transition a little bit more, and it's like he's high. Really starts looking at the stat and just like essentially laughing. Like that scene was that was kind of crazy. Yeah, well, not crazy, but just like almost kind of like basically ridiculous, like in terms of like how much he's freaking out. Like Lestat just basically starts like laughing back at him. So Lestat is basically training him now to become a proper vampire. So he's just a new baby vamp, as what Vampire Diaries usually like refer to them as. he's now a new baby vamp, and he's on the prowl at night. He's looking for victims, or he's looking to drink some blood. And it was all right how they showed his heightened senses and stuff. Like I think they could have done a little bit of a better job in terms of like the intensity, because like in all these shows they always, and when they show the transition of being a vampire or becoming a vampire, even from they pull from the original Bram story of vampirism for Dracula. Actually, I don't know how many of you guys know that, but they pull from that, having all these abilities to do these things like walking people's dreams, super strength, super speed, all this stuff. A lot of baseline vampire stuff they pull from the original Bram story of Dracula. But the way that they portrayed his transition, I feel like could have been a little bit more, I guess I want to say heightened, because from other shows that we've seen like Buffy and Angel and hell, I hate to say it, dreadful Twilight, the transition from becoming a human into a vampire is being like more significant. But again, I guess this episode wasn't really about Louis' transition. Like I said from the beginning of start of this episode, this episode I think was to show the transition, or to show the contrast between human and vampire from Louis' perspective. I think that's what it was about. And I think that they did that quite masterfully. And they switch back, they switch back to a scene where, again, on the table, they're clear opposite sides between Daniel and Louis, where Louis is drinking blood, he's eating blood, and Daniel's still enjoying his nice meal. Human vampire contrast. So taking a look at the next scene, Louis and Lestat, they start to hunt, and Louis wants to go after a gentleman, like they say one of those sailor gentlemen inside of the bar, and he's hungry because he's a new baby vampire. He wants to go after, like, what does Lestat say, like the prettiest girl in the ball, or prettiest girl in the room, or whatever it is. I found that line to be hilarious, but prettiest one, and he's like, no, we gotta like hunt people like that probably won't go missing or whatever, and like other people won't really notice. And they meet this salesman, and they go to this salesman's, and the salesman's talking about his family, his wife, and how he sells these things or whatever. I actually don't even remember exactly what he sells, but he apparently sells these things or says something, and they get him to return back to his place, Lestat's place, by the way. So it's Lestat, Louis, and the salesman in the house, and they. Louis kind of like waiting, like you can see it, like you can almost like kind of sense it, and like he's like itching to like basically, you know, feed off of this guy and drink his blood, and with him in the background. And something that I thought was really funny was like, you bite the neck, Louis, bite the neck. When Louis eventually like lets loose on this guy or whatever and attacks him to feed on him, he's like coaching from the sidelines. He's like, bite the neck, bite the leg. Like, and it's like, no, don't bite the blood. Drake, you suck it. You suck it. You suck it. That just, in that moment, I know that it wasn't necessarily meant to be funny, but all I could really think about is like, he murders a salesman. Yeah, sure. But all I could really think about was the fact that like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the cartoon Billy and Mandy from Cartoon Network. All I could really think about was Dracula don't, something that, you know, it's this, I don't know, Billy and Mandy is such a weird show. Dracula wasn't Dracula. He was an old man. He was an old black man that was like, Dracula don't suck. Dracula don't bite. Dracula don't suck. He lick or something like that. He licked it, or he bite away, or whatever it is. Just hilarious, honestly. But yeah, like that's all I can really think about in that moment. That was so great. But yeah, they murdered this guy, but the problem with it is that you can see in Louis' face that his disdain for like basically what he's done, despite Lestat's like comfortable nature with what just happened and what he's done. Louis seems like basically like sick to his stomach over what happened or whatever it is, and he's convinced himself that like no, like this isn't happening. I feel like almost like he's like in denial. He's like, I gotta go home, I gotta go like I gotta just get back to my my normal human life. And as he's leaving or whatever, Lestat basically says to himself like that you'll find that to be very difficult. And the next scene is basically him going into the sun and being burnt up by the sun. And I don't understand that's kind of cruel. He could have at least told him like, yo, vampires in the sun. And like, you know, this is like, again, you gotta remember like, this is like, it's like vampirism in their world isn't like a known thing. He could at least tell them though, like for sure, like, yo, vampirism and the sun don't really mix. So you won't be able to go outside again. Like Louis gets like disfigured, in my opinion. He gets like so like charred up just because of one thing that Lestat could have probably just went ahead and tell them, yo, avoid the sun. It's kind of a dick move, but yeah. Anyway, like he definitely should have like probably like told them like, okay, you want to go home? Sure, go home or whatever. Just basically avoid the sun. But he was in a rush. He's like trouncing out of there, trying to get out of there. But yeah, and being the homosexual lovers that they are, Lestat basically, well, Louis runs back after being disfigured by the sun, basically, and getting all burnt up. And throwing some milk on him. They throwing some milk on himself because he was getting burned up. And freaking, I think it was a milk guy or whatever. Someone on the street was trying to get in contact with him. He runs back to Lestat's place, and Lestat basically just starts like undressing in front of him or whatever. Again, because they're gay lovers or whatever, and that's fine. But like, he hops into this coffin with him, and they basically share the day together. I was gonna say the night, but they're vampires, so their day is our night, and their night is our night, the night's day. So it's basically reversed. So yeah, that whole thing was kind of like it's definitely interesting. Again, but I feel like realistically, like it was kind of like, and again, I know that this story it's not necessarily focused on the transition of becoming a vampire. I know that the story is not focused on the transition of becoming a vampire, but I feel that cinematographically and story-wise, they could have done a little bit of a better job than just like saying that, like, okay, like yeah, like this stuff. I guess the experience of it could have just been like a little bit better. It was just kind of, I think it was too fast. I think the pacing of it, that's what it was. It was too fast. It was just like, okay, boom, like I'm a vampire now. It assumed a lot. It assumed that you should get like, okay, yeah, he's a vampire, and like he's just like Lestat now. But like they didn't really, and I go into it a little bit later on, but they go into it a little bit later on, but they don't really I feel like it could have been they give a little more exposition as to what the whole vampirism thing is, what I'm talking about. But I feel like from Louis' perspective, from Louis transforming into this whole different thing, like physically, they focus on the metaphysical in terms of like an emotional stuff of like going through and the juxtaposition of and the contrast of being human versus vampire, feelings, emotion. But physically, the physical transitions, the physicality of it, they could have focused on it more. And I guess they don't really do that much in this show, but that was just, I guess, something that I felt that was a little bit lacking. But anyway, we switch back to the scene of showing more contrast, right? We switch back to the scene of Louis being interviewed by Danielle. And this time it's a little bit more of a jarring scene because in terms of the meals that they're having, because again, you gotta remember Louis, in this setting, by the way, guys, like it's clearly like Louis is a man of means, and has these servants walking around serving them food, and yeah, we'll get more into it later, but like offering like pints and blood like live from the vein. But a very contrasting, very like blunt difference of the very blunt difference is seen, I think, within the scene when the next meal or the next course comes out and Daniel is served his plate, but the plate that is revealed to Louis, or that has the covering of the food that's under Louis, it's not like really a meal. It's a live fox, I want to say. I'm pretty sure. I think it was like a fox or some kind of animal creature or whatever. Or definitely wasn't a rabbit. It was some kind of like actual like four-legged creature, and it was tied up and it was on the plate and it was actually moving. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the movement within that animal on first watch was passable. It was okay. It was passable. The second watch, you look at things a little bit more closely, you could tell like it was a little bit, there was a little cheese. It was a little fake. It was a little like, yeah, like, come on. Like the blood was okay. And the creepy part about this was that, like, I guess Louis was just staring directly at Daniel the entire time as he's about to feast on this thing, and he's like petting it and making sure it's calm before he feasts on it, like almost like warming it up. And Daniel stares at him the entire time, but he's not freaking. The thing is, like, Daniel's not freaking out, like, because I think like at this point, like, there are no illusions that Daniel doesn't know what he is, and he's a killer and he is a vampire. And it's to a point where he's like, oh no, it seemed like he was kind of like to a point where like, oh no, like this is normal. This is totally normal. This is fine. This is just basically what happens. And because like regular people would probably be freaking the fuck out or whatever it is, right? But like Daniel's been around the bend. He knows what this thing is, with even biting into it with blood all over his mouth. Looking like a vampire. He is not afraid. He's not impressed. Basically, he's not impressed. He's not impressed at all. He's just kind of like, okay, like kind of like, and as he continues to basically eat his own food, and they have contrasting discussions about vampirism and being human, and that was rather interesting, I think. So going into further into what happens next is that Louis and Lestat basically talk about how, okay, so the differences, well, not the differences, but the joys, or the debauchery that, I guess we would call it debauchery, but the fun that comes along with being basically a vampire, like reading minds and like being able to be superior, I want to say, in a sense. But yeah, and something that was like funny about the scene was that like one of the prostitutes is kind of like catching the eye of Lestat, and it kind of foreshadows a little bit of like, yeah, it seems like Louis and Lestat are like in this relationship, like this companionship relationship in a romantic sense as well, but also he is of a nature that's maybe not so exclusive to Louis, you know what I mean? And that I thought that was interesting because it does kind of set up a little bit of foreshadowing for essentially what happens. And like as they trouting about the town, traipsing themselves about the town, Lestat tries to teach Louis about reading minds and how he actually kind of, which I actually kind of forgot on the first watch around, because I thought that he never did do that, and I forgot that he had taught him slightly how to read the minds of other people or whatever. But he does to a degree, and it's kind of like, it's basically like everything else that you essentially hear. It's just like something else that you're hearing, like their heartbeat or their breathing or whatever it is. And he basically boils it down to three things. He says to him that like the humans only ever want three things. They want to go home, want food, and they want sex. And I mean, again, contrasting from what the vampire is and what the humans are. Basically, again, I think like what was the motive of this essentially this story. But I mean, just a quick comment on that though. Like, I guess human beings in general, yeah. I mean, I feel like that's an easy answer. Do you know what I mean? Human beings in general, I guess, like, yeah, it's really like realistically what I want. And like some scientists have actually believed, or have actually like countered this to say that like it's the main purpose of life, or the main being for life, is to basically, well, not the main being for life, though the purpose of life, the purpose behind life is to basically reproduce. There's no really any real meaning behind life rather than to reproduce. But I mean, that's a matter of perspective. Reproduce and feed, and you feed to live on, right? And then but anyway, let's get back to Interview with a Vampire. Interview with a Vampire, that's why we're here, folks. Okay, I mean, we're not here for any life philosophy lessons from Ash, or any deep dwelling insights from Ash. We're here for the Interview for a Vampire. So Louis goes home. Louis gets a chance to see and meet up with his old family now that he's transitioned into a vampire. I mean, he's probably seen them before, but we probably haven't been introduced to. We probably haven't seen him interact with them. This is the first time we've ever seen him interact with him since he's become a vampire. And so it feels like a long time, and it is technically sort of like a long time since he's basically seen them. So while I guess, and it's the way that they shot this, and the way that they made it look, it feels, and the way that they made it feel was that he was estranged to his family. Like, you know, if you like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. If you ever like go to college, or even if you go to camp, or you go away for a long time and you're away from home for more than a year or whatever it is, and you come back, there's this kind of like uneasiness that some people have around or about you, uneasiness and unfamiliarity within yourself, but also within like the people. You can sense it from the people around you, and it's kind of like, okay, like, oh, you're here now, or oh, you're back now. You're away in college or university or whatever it is, and now you're back now, and you're a little bit estranged. You have to kind of catch up to basically like what's been going on in your life essentially, but what's been going on. You have to catch them up with what's been going on in your life, but you have to catch up to as to what they've been going on in their life. And they did that. The acting in this is so good. They did that so masterfully with showing that estrangedness now that he has his vampire life. You know what I mean? Like, and he's been hanging around with Lestat. He does this so strongly with the fact that when he goes to meet his sister, and his sister tells him to take out the glasses, and he's like, "Oh, your eyes are as pretty as church glass." And at this point, Louis can hear the heartbeat within his sister, and he can tell her basically that she's having like twins or whatever it is, and she's kind of like, oh, how'd you know that or whatever it is, and then like it's kind of almost like brushed over as well, like to the fact that's how he would essentially know that information. But that swapping of my basic point is like that swapping of that information, that swapping of that information and exchanging of certain things and feelings, like that love of that family is still there. That's still his sister. He still loves her. She loves him, and they're still the same people. Like Louis says, it's like same eyes. It's still seeing me. Ain't nothing different or whatever it is. Even though like there is a big difference. Like he's a vampire now, and like his life has essentially changed in a very dramatic way. I find it interesting how he still cares about his family. He still wants to care about his family, because the whole point of them actually being there and then going and visiting the family in the first place, that was Louis' idea. Lestat didn't seem like he was too on board with it, and Lestat was kind of get him to pull away and push away from his human life, and Louis still kind of clings on to it and kind of wants to cling on to it, and more showing that like position of contrast between the vampire and the human. And I think that's again main theme what they were trying to focus on with this episode, and that's like from the perspective of the interview. But again, you gotta remember, like, this is the perspective of the interview of the vampire that's actually doing it too. It's Louis telling the story, which brings up other questions of like, I wonder if it did go down this way. And we'll talk about this maybe a little more in future episodes, but like, watching it, I've been thinking like, did it actually go this way? Not only did it actually go this way, but like, was it just, again, you gotta remember, like, this is someone's perspective. The show is called Interview with a Vampire. It's technically Louis' version of it. So, but anyway, we turn into the next scene, and the next scene is about him and this the alderman guy or some architect guy he was talking about, because like remember in the first episode they were talking about going into business and how he was being disrespected by these guys who assumed that he would do all the work just basically for like 10% of, you get 10% of the profit for all of the work, and some very unfair contrast. And this is where things get interesting. kind of, sort of. So the scenes kind of goes on about, basically heads what it breaks down to. The guy essentially is the guy that Louis goes to see is essentially berating him and belittling him and putting him down, all on the basis of his race, skin color. I shouldn't say race. We're all a part of the human race. There's no race. We're all human race. But realistically, because of his genetics, because his skin is darker than his, he has convinced himself that Louis is less than. But you know what? He is, he doesn't do it. He's not going to do it because he's in business with Louis, and because he's working with Louis, and he's trying to get Louis to do some work for him or whatever it is, to where they all profit. He's not going to necessarily come out and be bluntly racist towards him. It's the little jabs, and again, like, they play it so well. Like, fantastic actors on this, but they play it so well where I liked how this was written, because this is the actual reality of basically what happens. And because, guys, right off the back, I'm a person of color, but like, listen, this is exactly what happens, so I can relate. Is basically what I'm trying to say. But this is essentially what happens. You find yourself in a situation where it's kind of like, you're trying to get some stuff done. But at these little jabs, these little comments, it's always this microaggression that comes out, that racism in. It comes out in. And that's how you can tell that it's a real tool for, you know, people that are being racist. It's a real petty tool. It's not only a petty tool, but it's a tool that's just used for the small-minded and the weak, if you think about it, or whatever it is. Because if you actually felt this way, when you feel something, or when you feel a certain way about something, you outrightly, blatantly say it. You outrightly say that, okay, hey, you know, I feel this way. And if it's a strong enough emotion, you want to shout it out from the top of the heavens or whatever it is. That's how we are. That's how humans work. But it's a petty, small-minded way of thinking when you are racist, or when someone is essentially racist towards another individual. Now, he was just nitpicking at him on every little. He was impressing him so much. It's just like it was kind of like, basically the headline was basically like, oh, these are all awesome ideas for a Negro. And I'm just like, I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, yep, sadly, that's how they be. You know what I mean? Like, sadly, that's exactly how they be. And it's in every sense of the word, like, fucked up, like, so small. Why can't you just like, why he says like some other stuff, like, he's like, oh, you're smart too, or whatever it is. It's like, and it's kind of like, why can't you just like chill? Anyway, so this racist asshole, obviously he doesn't know that Louis is a vampire, a fucking vampire. And Louis goes on to explain like how, you know, all his life he had been, you know, having to deal with it or having to ignore that racism, essentially, or look around the racism to get to the point to where he is. You got to remember that Louis is a man of means, and he's essentially rich. His family's rich, and his family is essentially. He's a man of means. He's essentially they're doing well for themselves. But he's always had the reason, or the way that they've gotten there, the way that they have achieved so much, and Black people in general in that time, and the way that they had gotten to that point, and any person of color knows this, that when they approach with a racist or whatever it is, they just make the task more difficult, and they want to probably say something. And it's right in this day and age today. You should say something. You know, what the fuck was that about? You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Like, that was fucking racist. You know what I mean? You should fucking stand up and say something about it. Don't get twisted about that. But back then, they had to swallow it they found that, not had to, but they found that the better option, I guess, was to swallow it and to just say, move on and say yes sir, no sir, or whatever it is, to get to the point to basically where they wanted to be. But Louis is a vampire now. Louis doesn't have to put up with that shit. He doesn't. He really doesn't. And I mean, whether it was right or wrong to kill this alderman, whatever person who was being essentially blatantly like racist to him, calling him Negro, just ew, like, what the fuck? Calling him Negro, like, I mean, it wasn't okay. It wasn't right, or whatever it is. And I mean, having that kind of power as a Black man in those times, that direct physical power, along with, like, yeah, you have the mental game, you have the financial power, that financial freedom. He most likely had more room than most Black people, probably, for himself. But he can actually, the actual act of physically being able to do it. I mean, I guess we're not condoning violence on this channel whatsoever, but it's kind of understandable that he would make that we can't really call it a mistake though. He would have a lapse in judgment of saying, you know what? I'm tired of this racist shit. I want to end it. I want to do something about it right here, right now. That's not surprising. That was a very understandable reaction from a writing perspective and a character's perspective as well, from Louis Depont-Delac. But of course, Lestat, being his Caucasian lover, who is not from he's not from the Americas. He doesn't really get the whole like southern implications of it. It causes a fight and a rift between them. And to the point where he's calling him fledgling, and Louis retaliating with like, wait a minute, now that sounds like the word slave or whatever it is. And Lestat like yells back at him in French. But I mean, how could he understand? How could he understand the implications of how it's affected, and how he's finally able to do something about it, not just swallow and not just take it, and just finally, it was an overcorrection. Now finally correct him in his dealings. So they end up fighting like a old married couple. And at this point, Louis has his own car, and I thought that was kind of cool. But they end up fighting, and they talk about, and Lestat basically wants to make it up to Louis, and Louis is like, oh, you want to make it up to me? Let me buy so-and-so club. And that basically sparks a new venture into him owning this new I want to say it was a club. Yeah, it was a club. Yeah, this is him owning this new club because, like I said before, Louis is a man of means, and he can now. Well, he's more solidified his status even more now. He's making more money. He's doing well now. He's bringing up people from his old district and his old ways. He's moving into it. What it looks like is a more cleaner kind of like cleaner business model, like not just more like elegant, like, because like realistically they had saloons and they had like the liquor and the beer and the girls back then, 1910s, but like they were like, it's like now like they have different like levels of it, like, but it's like he's leveling up a little bit, like in terms of that, and he's able to bring in these foreign strangers who they can kill every once in a while, to basically essentially feed off of human blood. But which at this point now, he says that he only does every, once in a while, because he, despite all this, and despite killing the alderman, and despite in a rage of fury or whatever, I still suspect, you can kind of still tell that Louis doesn't really like doing this. He doesn't really like being that instance was a fit of rage. It was in a fit of rage. And I like how the show didn't like, because you guys know how like certain shows, like when they talk about racism or when they talk about race or whatever it is, they're like tiptoeing about it, and it's kind of like to the point where it's like, you can tell who wrote this, like but I feel like they might have had some people of color room influence on this particular thing, because when he was speaking with the alderman, and when that whole thing happened with him being murdered and stuff, it didn't really feel like, it felt like a very genuine perspective, but it also didn't really feel like it's a weird thing. We as the audience, at least, like, let me know if you guys agree with this in the comments. It didn't really feel like he agreed with like killing that guy. He didn't really agree with like how he reacted in that situation. Like, he did it, but I guess like almost kind of like he wasn't happy with himself. It wasn't like he was boasting about it either, but not really. Anyway, and then Louis goes to visit his sister again, and then again it looks like some time has passed, showing more of that contrast of him becoming more and more vampiric over time. he goes to visit his sister, and she has babies now. Babies. And he was right about the twins, like, because she was like, oh, all right, I gotta go off to do something with the twins now because they're crying in their sleep or something like that. So she hands him the baby. And the baby is like cooing in his arms or whatever, but Louis is initially looking at the baby with some doubt, but also some like hunger in his eyes. And like he like wants to eat this baby, and he's like, you can see him like in his face, like he's fighting her just to like feeding off of this baby. And you sense it the first time she goes, and then she comes back, and he tries to genuinely give the baby to her, and she leaves again for the second time though, and you can see his nature of essentially vampirism. He's fighting it. He's fighting these urges of basically wanting to kill this child. And we switch back to Daniel, and Daniel's just like pushing him on the issues, like, okay, like, well, did you eat the baby? And at the time watching it, it's kind of like, yeah, I want to know, like, did you eat the baby? Like, did you eat the baby or whatever it is? And switching back to the scene with Daniel and Louis in present day, more contrast of the human and the vampire comes about when Louis starts to talk about his family and etc. or whatever it is, and in that conversation and in that back and forth, we have a young gentleman comes in, and he sits down, and he's human. He's definitely human. And in the middle of the talk and fighting with him, again, Daniel doesn't look fazed by this, not really. He begins feeding on this young man's neck, and he's drinking, and he looks very healthy and very like athletic, actually, by the way. And but also, again, it shows that like with the cinematics, they imply or they force a little bit more estrangeness from the fact that the young man is, I want to say Russian, or he's foreign, European or something like that. But yeah, he begins feeding on him, and I thought that was actually a nice touch. But he starts to actually talk with Daniel a little bit too, and that's only when Daniel has a harder time of eating. And this is actually very interesting because it's an actual contrast from when he was basically feeding on the animal. It's like, okay, humans feed on animals, vampires feed on animals. Humans don't feed on humans, vampires feed on humans. See that like that contrast that they constantly do, and to kind of like, not to make you feel, but to like push that theme of differences and of attempting to be, I guess, of Louis trying to be not human, but like to show that, I guess within this, what I see too is like Louis back then was kind of trying to live both the lives of the vampire and the human, trying to balance them out. But it seems like Louis in the present, that kind of showed it, like Louis in the present, that's kind of essentially showing that, hey, like present day Louis is kind of like over it. It seems like it shows that contrast too. It's kind of like he's the vampire. He accepts what he is. He feeds on humans in front of the humans. And that's the only one time where Daniel is like slightly disgusted, I want to say, to a certain degree, about it. But okay, well, back to what I was saying before though, he doesn't eat the baby. Right, so he doesn't eat the baby. We know that he doesn't eat the baby, and the fact that he doesn't eat the baby is a good thing. But he just leaves the baby on the ground. I was kind of like watching. I was kind of like, "What the fuck? Why would you just leave the baby on the ground? Like, can you just like? I mean, I guess that's probably the best place for it. So well, the baby can't fall if you're on the ground. You can't already fall if you're on a flat surface. If you're on the lowest flat surface, you can't fall again. That makes sense, right? But still, like, I mean, like, I don't know. You don't have to. I don't know. Anyway, he just leaves the baby on the ground and he goes back to Lestat's place, crying to him essentially. And also something weird, a little bit of exposition, but not an exposition, a little bit of details on with the vampires on this series, dude. They cry red blood. I can't recall. I feel like we've seen this before, and I think that might have been a True Blood thing, where vampires cry blood. Again, interact with me in the comments, guys, in the comment section of YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. Like, let me know if where is that crying blood? They've done that before. I can't remember where they did it, but I thought that was that in part of vampire lore. I'm pretty sure that they've done it before, but I can't exactly place where they've done it. Yeah. Anyway, so what happens next is that, what was happening actually was that he was crying about this. He was making noise crying about this. And he was, complaining to Lestat basically like how he almost killed his nephew or whatever it is, him. And he felt really beat up about it. And you can tell that he has real emotions and feelings about this. Lestat, on the other hand, it seemed like he cared, but like not really. And I guess maybe that's because he's an older vampire and he's been around this bend before or whatever it is. But that's how this perspective of, that's what I got from essentially from this. And I found it very interesting. I found it very interesting how the shift, like Lestat, I felt like it was too quick. Like he came, like if your girlfriend or your boyfriend came to you, whoever you're dating, whatever it is, non-binary, cool, whatever, dude. But like, if your partner came to you and they said that, okay, I have a problem, I'm so sad, blah, blah, whatever it is. You would try to comfort them, and Lestat tries to do this, but I find it amazing. Maybe realistically, you would still probably be kind of bummed out about it. You'd still be kind of bummed out and still kind of sad about basically whatever you're going through, or your partner's going through. Your partner would still be bummed out about it. But like, he switched on a dime, and I feel like that might be a part of his vampiric nature now. But his emotions or his feelings, it didn't really seem like he cared that much after the fact about him almost killing his nephew when Lestat brings up like, hey, let's go to the opera. Like, and like, I guess Louis explains that he has a way about him, but like so fast to just switch just to like, okay, like I'm fine now. Let's go to the opera. Like, oh, now I'm fine. Like, and Louis kind of like, yeah, okay. I don't know. The switch from I'm so sad about I'm definitely so sad about this emotional thing that I'm going through to we're going to go into the motherfucking concert, yo. Like, was just a bit that was just a bit it was a bit jarring. It was a bit fast. Something I want to touch on was like when they actually go to the opera house, how this white privilege is basically seen about within Lestat as he walks in front of Louis. And again they explain it like okay, yeah, like this is all a guise and this is all a ruse just to basically show that because they didn't want to cause any conflicts or any issues amongst the humans, because this is Louisiana, and two gay interracial lovers might in the 1910s might ruffle a few feathers in my in their opinion. So they're like, you know what, we're gonna go ahead and just play it like this, where I'm your like butler or driver or something like that. But when the overture starts for the concert, for the symphony, we are gonna sit together. So it's just like this secret romantic relationship that almost like they basically have, and they do basically have it, and that kind of sort of makes the story it drives the story forward and makes it a little more interesting and a little more compelling as well. Something we learned about Lestat in this episode too is that he loves music, and music is his thing. It's the one thing, and how Louis basically explains it is that it's like the bridge. Yeah, it's like the bridge between him and the food, the humans, basically. Him and him and them. It's the one thing that they found, that Lestat finds appreciation within humans, as opposed to, again, a contrast when Louis back in the day, 1910s Louis was trying to be more human and vampiric. It's the one time that they shared this connection, this special connection that where they appreciate humans for who they are and what they are, and they don't have to necessarily look at them as food or things to basically kill. And it seems like they had more of a connection, more of a basic understanding of one another when they were at the opera. Now, Lestat's loving one of the singers. Lestat's not loving one of the other singers. And you can already tell, kind of like how Louis says, the hunt was basically on from there. And I mean, being a musician myself, honestly, guys, and don't worry, you guys are gonna be able to hear some of my music, and I'm gonna be promoting a lot of music on this channel or whatever it is. So get ready for that plug. But anyway, being a musician myself, I kind of get where he's coming from. Where if you are doing a performance, and if it's a live professional performance, especially it looked like it was one of those operas. It looks like he was in a concert hall amongst many people, and he performs this regularly as it seems, and it looks like all the rich and fancy people are there. If this is the case, what I don't understand is, why isn't someone telling him that he's off? Why isn't someone telling him that he's not singing on key, or he's singing the wrong notes of the key? Why? Someone should be telling him that. Someone should be telling him that, and so he can correct it, and so he can get better at his craft. It should be. Someone should be. Whether it's the director of the concert or whatever it is, someone should be like, hey, you're a little flat, or you're a little off, or whatever. You can just practice these notes a little bit or whatever it is. So I get it from that perspective. But Lestat takes it a bit too far. So he invites him back to his house, and he starts to play this song that they were singing in the concert on the piano, and he's playing along, and he's telling the guy to sing, and he's trying to sing, and he just outright embarrasses this man. Absolutely embarrasses this man. and Louis just in the corner on the couch, just basically watching this dismantling of this artist or whatever it is. And how Louis puts it, you can see all of his fears and all of his doubts, all of his confidence be destroyed within seconds from Lestat. And Lestat comes in with a brutal murder of basically just severing his vocal cords. And I thought that this was so absolutely so it was beautiful, almost, in a sense. It was beautiful cinematically, but also it was beautiful in terms of how destructive it was, and how on point it was for a vampire. He's a singer. He's a vampire. He's not singing the correct notes. He takes away his voice, but he also can't scream in pain as he's drained basically of his life. And we see more conflict arise within Louis and Lestat, of Louis trying to hold on to his humanity, and Lestat who's basically throwing away his humanity at this point. And he's convincing him that hey, if you're gonna eat humans or whatever, choose a side. Eat humans or don't eat humans or whatever. It's basically choose a side. Be your side. Don't be in the middle. Don't be in the middle like how you have been. And Lestat's just basically like yelling at him at this, but which is absolutely the way to go for this. But as he sits there watching him continue to drain the singer, he's watching him. He's playing along, and he's willingly going along with killing the singer, killing the man. He's not necessarily standing up for him or trying to stop it. He's going along with it. He sees that. I think he starts to see this, but towards the end of it, he kind of sees like he's never gonna be like Lestat. He's never gonna be that kind of vampire. Which is funny because like we see in the future with the interviewer with Daniel. I mean, that comment or that statement is kind of rocky. I feel like at this point in the show, at this point of us watching what we've seen so far, but complacently he goes along with being a vampire. And then also, like, what is he gonna do? Like, Lestat's a vampire. He's a much older vampire. Like, he could probably still kind of like kill him, like, realistically. So in a sense, at least I got my perspective was kind of like he's kind of stuck too, right? He's kind of stuck in the way of like this relationship that might not necessarily be the healthiest, but he's going along with it for the good parts. But also he's being also to basically be complacent to this person who's like kind of sort of brought him in. And it's very, 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 very interesting. And they continue to feed off of the singer. And the last, I think, the last scene basically brings us to the dinner is continuing, interview dinner that's happening between Daniel, the interviewer, and Lestat, the vampire. And something interesting that's happening is that for the final meal, they have dessert. They both have this ice cream kind of dessert thing that Daniel goes on to explain to him that I had this dessert when I first proposed to my wife. And Lestat basically alludes to him, or he lets him know, like, I knew that you like this. I knew that you like this because I read this about you, that you like this. This is one of your favorite desserts. And they start to connect. You see that, they start to connect. They start to share things a little bit or whatever. Still in the middle, still on the opposite sides of the table, they start to connect. And Daniel asks the question, can you even taste this? Like, and he says, like, no, this is basically like, it tastes like paste to me. But if you think about it, I guess thinking about it now, the reason Lestat, all through the dinner, Lestat has been eating like a vampire. But towards the end of the dinner, he starts to eat like a human, despite what he just said, knowing and it tasting like paste, like everything else, like other thing that he eats, and every other thing that he eats, like it tastes like paste. But knowing that, he still does this with the dinner, and he continues on to eat it even after he says it tastes like paste. So that means that, I guess in my perspective, it's kind of like he kind of wants to be, he almost like he strives to somewhat hold on to his humanity, or it's a charade for other humans to hold on to humanity. But I think cinematographically, what they were trying to communicate is that, like, humans, vampires, we're not so different. But then in the second shot, in the next shot, they show the pictures in this dining room of one side on Louis and one side of Danielle, and there are pictures right in the foreground while they're eating ice cream. And I think this tells a message of, like, while they're eating ice cream, one vampire, one human. They're eating ice cream. They're eating the same things. One's enjoying it. One's not enjoying it. It shows the layers of what's actually happening. Vampirism and human, they might look the same. It's kind of like, I think it's an analogy. Vampirism, there's a lot of depth here. Vampirism and human, they might look the same. Vampires might look like humans. Humans look like vampires. But on the depths, there's something very different. They're both eating ice cream. In the background, the images though. One image, it appears to be of like a ship, you know, sailing in the wind, about itself. And it looks like I think like sailors or something are on it. It looks like the ship is in the ocean and it's going through some waves. And that's the side Daniel's on. And the side that Louis is on, it looks like it's land. It looks like it's land. Some kind of trees or some kind of agriculture is growing in about it. And I think that, again, it's just to show that on the surface layer, vampires, humans look the same, but on a deeper level, they're two completely different things. And I guess also, if you think about it, it can also kind of be viewed as kind of like the art is kind of like where we're headed to and where they already are. Vampires are dead, humans are alive. The ship represents the alive aspect of the journey that you're still on, and the destination is vampirism, or the evolution of that is vampirism. Like we all, in the end, we all inevitably pass away. We all have our time on this planet, all have our time on this earth, and this is the destination where we're headed to. And Louis basically already there, but also you can kind of view it as like Louis kind of still strives to be human, to still go on that journey with the attempt of eating this like food.
But like every other episode, guys, we can't forget about Ash's favorite scenes. And the top 3 favorite scenes are definitely being 1, the killing of the construction worker / alderman. That scene was just so very cathartic, and just, I think, the opportunity of the thought of just like, if someone, that's exactly like, it's so iconic because I think it's exactly how if someone of color was in that situation and they were a vampire, that's how that would go. So that scene was constructed so very well. That idea of that scene was constructed so very well. So when the alderman or the construction guy died, it was so very, like I said, like for cathartic, and it felt like justified, but it was just so believable. That's what it was. Second scene is, did you eat the baby? Yeah, that scene was just like such an intense scene of again showing that very contrast of, you know, what the human was, or what he was before and what he is now, of Louis being once the vampire and now he's the human. His coming to a head with that. And my final scene definitely had to have been when Louis first was transitioning into a vampire and they were in the cemetery and he was just high as a kite off of his ass. But yeah,
that was episode 2 of Interview with a Vampire, guys. Yeah, so definitely let me know what you guys think. This one was, I mean, again, not as strong as the pilot or episode 1, I think, in my opinion. Definitely not as strong. In fact, let's get the score.
On review, Interview with a Vampire episode 2 receives a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, guys, that's gonna do it for me. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you guys listening, watching on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on our socials, so Twitter, the Facebook, Instagram. Yeah, so give us a like, a shout out. We really much appreciate it. Comment on all the things that we've been talking about for this episode. Let me know what you guys think. I'm really interested, even if it stays down like in the future. And lastly, guys, don't forget, be safe, be kind, be you. Take care.